Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
So let me begin with Nixon. Now, this is something that has been in the works for a while, and the M23 rebels are also demanding the release of prisoners linked to Rwanda and also seeking political recognition, part of the talks. How do these demands align with international norms, and are there likely challenges that these demands might actually pose to the DRC's sovereignty and justice system?
It's very interesting that the deal was signed in Washington at the pressure of the United States and its clientele in the Paul Kagame and his crew. The M23, issued a statement immediately after the signing of this declaration of statement that it does not engage them. And one can tell what Rwanda is using. One, on the other hand, to want to push the DRC and the United States to say that this is a Congolese issue, and therefore, as the accusation mount of Rwanda's involvement, the Rwanda are able to play what they call plausible deniability to take responsibility in the continued violence carried out by the M23 for which they are supporting. That is crucial. The second aspect is the role of the United States itself in the conflict in the DRC. Having brought Rwanda and the DRC together to sign this declaration of principles and intent to end the conflict over and above the mineral deal that the United States and the DRC is going to sign. So you can see here, one have to differentiate the nexus between the intention of the Democratic Republic of Congo to end the war via a security guarantee through mineral deals, the United States' interest in the region, the Great Lakes region, and the broader context of the geopolitical dynamics that are playing out in the region. And then you have Rwanda's proxy continued economic battle within Eastern DRC by having access to the mineral wealth of that country through a legalization of this declaration of principle via the legal framework that will be established during the negotiations, and therefore cornering the DRC into accepting and ceding its resources to Rwanda. Therefore, British, American, and the European Union multinational corporation access those minerals through Rwanda. And I think for me, that is a very problematic issue. But however, this does not mean that the continued violence and the mayhem that the M23 has been continuing with is going to stop, because one can see clearly the intention behind their declaration, saying that what the government of Rwanda and the government of DRC signed in Washington, D.C. in the process of Michael Rubio does not engage the M23 and the IFC.
All right, now let's hear from Claude. Now, Claude is also a Rwandan genocide and civil war survivor, and he's an author of Survivors Uncensored as well. Now, Claude, looking back at personal memories, from the civil war back then, what still stands vividly to you, and how did the violence of the genocide and civil war shape your understanding of what is actually happening in the DRC, or how are you able to connect with the people of the DRC at the moment?
I think what is happening right now to the Congolese actually is re-traumatizing, because a lot of the things that happened during the civil war in Rwanda, gathering people in meetings and surrounding them and killing them in masses is happening in the Congo right now. Going into hospitals and killing people that are wounded. I mean, this has happened where the M23 went into the hospital, found wounded people, and stabbed them to death. These are a lot of the things, like, you know, the vivid memories of people getting killed with hand weapons, machetes and knives and things like that. It's happening today in the Congo. The other thing is, what's happening to the Congolese people is actually a genocide. You know, there is an intent to destroy a part of the Congolese people and to occupy their land, to take over the land so that they can extract the resources. The other thing that stands now as a look back at what happened in Rwanda and is happening in the Congo today is the same formula. These negotiations, these peace deals signings and ceasefire signings and all of these things happened in Rwanda's civil war. They were never respected. And at the time, it was the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which is today in in power in Rwanda, led by Paul Kagame. And they're using the same formula. They used that formula before the civil war in Rwanda, in Uganda. They're using it today in the Congo, where they use the ceasefires as a time to regroup and take over some more territory. They use these peace negotiations as cover to look like they have a goodwill to actually do something in the conflict, to end the conflict, but they really are continuing to fuel it. And when you look at the fact that every time people talk about the M23, they say it's the M23 backed by Rwanda. No, it's the Rwanda military and Uganda's military that actually invaded the Congo, and it needs to be taken as an invasion. And today, the declaration that we had is no different than what we've seen in the past. And so, going through my vivid memories, but also in the current events, the Congolese people are worthy and they must get justice in order for this thing to end. The other thing is, as long as the US and the European Union and the British and the Canadians do not use their leverage on Rwanda's government, and Uganda's government, by the way, also, which depend heavily on foreign aid as leverage to actually tell them to stop and get out. Like the resolution 2773, UN resolution 2773 is clear. They must cease fighting, and Rwanda's soldiers need to retreat back to Rwanda and get out of the occupied territories. Congo is under occupation. The genocide in Rwanda happened in a similar fashion in the context of a war, a long 3-year civil war. And today, Congo has been going through it for the last 30 years, and they've had just the children that have died in the Congo as a result of the invasion of Rwanda and Uganda is at least 3 times more than the victims in Rwanda. And so it's for me, I connect with the Congolese people in the suffering, the displacement, the rape camps, being homeless when you had a home, and being displaced, all for the sake of resources to power our appetite in the West, in our consumerism.
Okay, now let's hear from you, Nixon. You heard what Claude has actually said. Now, Claude did say that there have been such ceasefires in Rwanda, and he feels that it is an opportunity or a strategy for them to regroup. Now, do you share the same sentiment, considering that previous peace talks collapsed over disagreements on prisoner releases and political recognition, the same thing that the M23 is actually asking or requesting for at the moment, especially with the DRC historically refusing to recognize the M23 as a legitimate political actor? How is this expected to play out?
We have to go back and understand the context of the history in the region. And I think Claude captured a moment of it. You have to look at how the National Resistance Army in Uganda, for which Paul Kagame was a part of the internal security apparatus in Uganda, fought the government of Uganda at the time led by Tito Okello as they were negotiating in Nairobi. The war was continuing in Luwero. And they captured Kampala at the time while the peace talks was going on in Nairobi. And I think this is what Claude alluded to. The same mode of operation was done when the negotiations were going on in Arusha. Habyarimana's plane was downed by the very RPF, and the witness to those events, including the former Army Chief of Staff for General Kayumba Nyamwasa, the late Patrick Karegeya, saying they were ready to testify that Kagame is responsible for these atrocities and crime by also declaring the genocide in Rwanda. And we see similar trends happening in Eastern DRC, where the government of Rwanda engaged in negotiations with the DRC over the conflict that is happening in the DRC, at the same time denying that it is not part of the conflict in the DRC, but also with numerous UN reports coming out that Rwanda have over and above more than 4,000 troops in Eastern DRC. But we know for the fact, as Claude said, that there is no M23, these are just Rwandan proxies that are fighting in Eastern DRC. So I thought that should lay that context out to understand what is going on. The second core aspect in clearly showing that there is no political will on the part of Rwanda to end this conflict is the statement issued by the M23 saying that the discussion in Washington does not engage them, and therefore they are going to continue. Therefore, you have on the other hand Rwanda's proxy militias, RDF, in the name of the M23, issuing a statement that the declaration of principle signed in the US does not engage them. That tells you how much that they are going to continue with the war. And one wonder whether, while the United States is pressuring these governments, both the DRC and Rwanda, to sign this declaration of principle in ending the conflict, whether they factored in the sentiment on the ground, but also the M23 in finding a leeway to maneuver this statement and saying that does not engage them. And that shows the lack of sincerity, both on the part of the US, but also the second aspect is to sort of alleviate pressure from the Rwandan government, which have been facing numerous sanction threat, both from the European Union and the United States itself, as well the UK and Germany, who are major donors, except for the Netherlands and France, who still continue supporting the Rwandan government. The third aspect looks at the issue of, as I said earlier, plausible deniability, in the sense that Rwanda is able to say that we have been arguing that we're not involved in this conflict, and this issue of the M23 are the Congolese by Congolese themselves, and therefore their declaration that the principle of signed in the agreement in the US does not engage us, and therefore we are going to continue with the war. We, as Rwanda, are not involved in this. And this is why you see the issue around finding peace in the Eastern DRC facing numerous challenges, but because there have been a lack of sincerity and political engagement, as well as diplomatic will to end this issue in its entirety. And we know for the fact the training around the military in Rwanda was done by the United States. The UK, most of these army officers are trained by Sandhurst in the US. Okay. Israel is another part of this conflict in Nixon, terms of training Rwandan military.
Permit me to, push your narrative to Claude. Let's hear what he has to say regarding what you talked about Rwanda. And Claude, also given that, especially the DRC's accusations that Rwanda is backing M23 rebels, in reigniting ethnic tensions across the border. How do you personally feel, seeing the conflicts and displacement return to a region you once hoped will never experience such a horror again? And also, what are your thoughts on all that Nixon has actually said about Rwanda having a hand in the conflict?
I think the DRC saying that Rwanda is backing the M23 is an incorrect way to put it. The DRC has been invaded by both Rwanda and Uganda, and this goes back to 1996, and it's still happening today. They use proxies. They have used, the M23 is the latest of the groups that they've used in the past, or at least they've called themselves in the past, in order to evade the fact that it's an invasion of the Congo. And so that has to be clear. Now, what Nixon is saying about Rwanda's involvement, it really is not a secret for Rwandans or for anybody that follows the region. The Rwandan troops are in the Congo by the thousands. We have evidence, we have satellite images showing paths from Rwandan military camps to M23 camps. The expansion of satellite images showing the expansion of military graves in Rwanda since the spike of the violence, the latest spike of the violence by the M23, like large expansions, not just something insignificant or maybe that would look normal. There is the weapons that are being used in the Congo. There's been Rwandan soldiers captured. I mean, they're saying one of the conditions for negotiations is Rwandan soldiers who've been captured. So if that is the case, then how is it that Rwandan soldiers aren't in the Congo? It reminds me of a time when a similar thing was happening. Rwanda was denying, we have no troops in the Congo, we have no troops in the Congo, and they did it for years. And then one day, they held a ceremony to welcome Rwandan soldiers coming back from Congo, the same Congo that they say that they had no soldiers in. And so this is happening again. The other part is about the political will. What is happening is we are being played. When Rwanda goes to, there's one good thing that's happening with this, with all of these peace brokerage. Everyone is going to Kagame, because he is the ultimate leader of the M23. And there's no sense in going to his proxies, because at the end of the day, Rwanda controls the M23. We saw it in 2012, 2013 in the previous incarnation. What happened when Rwanda was sidelined and isolated and sanctioned, the M23 stopped. It stopped then, and they went into refugee camps in Rwanda and Congo. So the return of refugees, the stalking of ethnic tensions, again, this is what is happening. At least the claim that there's the ethnic tension is at the center of the M23's grievances is fabricated. One, because Congo is one country that they have over 300, maybe over 400 ethnic groups, and you can't even tell, you don't know the names of those groups. And so what we have right now is the extreme elements of Congolese, the extreme elements of people of Tutsi ethnicity, claiming that Tutsis are being discriminated against, and now unleashing violence against every other Congolese ethnic group in the name of freeing the Congolese Tutsis. But in fact, this is more like having the KKK saying that they are fighting for the rights of oppressed white people. And when you look, or the oppressed people in general, but specifically for the oppressed white people, and going after every ethnic group. This is a similar thing. You have the extremist people who are basically unleashing violence, so that they can take over territory, take over people's villages, and set up these businesses, which they have, loot the minerals through Rwanda, and make a lot of money and put themselves in power. I will say this: if people really are serious about ending what's happening, the violence in the Congo, stop buying the minerals in the Congo, from the Congo, stop buying it from Rwanda and Uganda. The European Union has almost $1 billion deal with Rwanda to purchase minerals from Rwanda that Rwanda does not have in its soil. If they really want to stop that deal, and stop all the purchasing of those minerals from Rwanda, and see what happens to the M23. And so I agree with Nixon. Unfortunately, being from Rwanda and being from a country that is aggressing our neighbors does not stop me. And it's actually the duty and the responsibility of a survivor of such horrific atrocities, someone who was made to dig my own grave with my mother, to speak up when I see such violence unleashed on other people. And so it's really important to be clear and show that there is no sincerity in the deal that's being signed, because you have, on one hand, the government that actually unleashed these rebels into the Congo, the so-called rebels that actually invaded Congo, claiming, okay, they are signing a deal, but then the rebels, on the other hand, the so-called rebels, on the other hand, their proxies are saying this does not engage us. I will say this: if Rwanda and Uganda are stopped, there is no M23.
All right. We're so sorry you had to go through that while you were really young, but then we're actually about wrapping up, and let's have your final thoughts briefly, if you may. This is for Nixon.
I think my final thought, I have to look at the geopolitical context in which this conflict is happening, particularly with the signing of the mineral deal with the United States and the Congolese government. On the other hand, also giving Rwanda a fair share of those deals in terms of legalizing in this Rwanda's invasion and illegality through this agreement that was signed with the United States. And that shows me a lot that there are going to be a lot of contestations, given the fact that China is much involved as well in the DRC in terms of mineral extraction. And it shows that the geopolitical tensions that are happening in the context of the DRC, despite what you see beyond the invasion of Rwanda and Uganda inside DRC, are going to continue, in a sense that unless there is a political will on a greater power, as Claude said, the stopping of going through the back door of the mineral deal, but making sure also that what would have been as a reason for conflict in DRC become rather a building block for peace and development in Eastern DRC and the DRC as a whole, but also the region. And that will depend much on the geopolitical tensions, but the willingness of greater power politics that is playing out between China and the United States in a resource competition in the DRC.
Well, let's hope that those in mediation are serious about bringing an end to the war in Congo, and we hope that peace is finally, brought to that particular region in no time. Thank you so much, Nixon Katembo, analyst, Great Lakes and East Africa, for joining us. Also, thank you, Claude Gatebuke. I don't know if I got that pronunciation correctly. Gatebuke, co-author of Survivors Uncensored, for joining us and speaking on this as well. We appreciate you for your time.